We're glad to have you along for this Agriculture Today. And to start off this Monday edition, we'll get into the latest on the cattle market front. Along with us once again is livestock economist Glynn Tonsor of K-State Research and Extension, who, by the way, will be sharing his thoughts on the extended cattle market outlook at the upcoming Cattlemen's Day here at K-State this Friday. More on that a bit later on. Glynn, to the market action this past week. And coming off of that strong showing the previous week, the cash fed cattle trade did relatively well, you'd have to say.
Yeah, on balance, I would call the week kind of a mixed bag. We'll break down the cattle and feed report here in a moment, but there's a lot of watching and seeing what was going to be in that report. So we had a few ups and downs, but on balance, there wasn't a lot of movement outside of cutout, which I'll break down in a moment. But let's just walk through it. On the board, nearby live cattle contract, April contract was $128, down about $2 for the week. Most of that fall off was later in the week. March feeder cattle was $146, down $3 for the week. So on the board, there was some positioning in advance of the cattle and feed report, I think. On the cash side, fed cattle, as you said, was actually up about $1.50, a little above 128 for the 5-market average. Feeder cattle, as usual, depends on what market I would quote, but very much a mixed bag. Even volumes were a little bit thrown off by the weather that went through different parts of the country. As a sidebar, I was driving South Dakota and around Kansas, and it was a nice problem to have some moisture you'd have to fight. So as long as you keep the truck on the road, that's fine. But Kansas market here, feeder cattle was flat, up $5, depending on weight class. 5 to 6 weights were called at $190 for the week. 7 to 8 weights were called at $150 for the week. So if I back up before I get into the cutout, I think there was, on balance, kind of holding the gains from the prior week, as you said, and positioning for what's always of interest is that cattle and feed report. The cutout market is worth pausing and highlighting for just a moment, is both choice and select were up notably. Choice closed the week at over $218, up more than $8 compared to the prior Friday. Select was just under $213, up about $7 from the prior Friday. Those are notable increases. And I'll pause right there just to let you know the wholesale beef market is conveying some notable demand strength. If you have that going on, those are notable increases, and that's a continuation from the prior week. That's nice. I think that positioned the market in some sense to absorb what might be at least one statistic's bearish in the cattle and feed report. If you have a strong demand setting, that is a nice part of that. As a reinforcement of that, the choice select spread currently is at about $5.50. For context, a year ago it was about $2. So that alone is actually an encouraging sign, because the larger that spread, one thing is it's an indicator of beef quality demand, so that is there. But I'm also highlighting that because over the next 3 or 4 months, typically we increase the choice select spread. So from now through, let's say, June 1, if not another full month, it'll be worth watching if that continues again. Last year's spike was notable starting from about now. And from a beef demand perspective, that's going to be important to watch.
And in fact, just to beat that drum a little more, how noteworthy this is, you think about the seasonal trends for the cutout this time of the year, we don't see this kind of strength typically at all. And so when we get into that grilling season in the late spring and early summer, one would think if all holds normal, that demand could continue to push upward.
Yeah, no, very much so. And continue with that story. There's a lot of discussion about how many animals are in feedlots and how large the calf crop is and so forth. And we know there's large supplies. I am beating this drum for several months now, is, the ultimate prices are going to hinge more on demand outcome and less the supply chain, because we kind of know the supply side. But there's an optimistic tone, exactly as you said, Eric, because if we have a good demand front right now when we seasonally don't normally, that at least sets up the prospect we have an abnormally good run for the next few months. So for those that are optimistic out there, that's one point you can hang your hat on. One more statistic to reinforce that. January beef prices that ERS puts out were above the prior January. So that only happens when you have larger volumes, when demand is increasing. So there are a lot of statistics, whether it's wholesale beef or retail prices and so forth, that we can break down that says we're starting 2018 with a good demand footing, and that makes me more optimistic than I probably would have been, say, back in Labor Day.
Now, to maybe toss a cup of water on this situation, the USDA's cattle on feed report, and maybe not overly dramatic here, but there is a bearish overtone to it, particularly on the placement side.
Yeah, so let's take the two that weren't market movers for sure, I think. So the on-feed inventory was up 8%, right in line with expectations, so not much action or surprises there. Likewise, January marketings were up 6%, right in line with pre-report expectations, so we won't talk a lot about that. What was a little bit out of the expected realm was January placements were up 4%. Pre-report was basically expecting no change, and the range, the largest increase was actually plus 3%. So this is outside the range of pre-report estimates, so it's going to get some discussion. But I'm going to pause, and normally I would call that bearish, and on balance it probably is at least a little bit bearish, but maybe not as much as we normally would think, at face value for that, for a couple of reasons. One is particularly the cutout strength the prior week. I think there is some beef moving. Cold storage report is signaling that as well, which is good. But moreover, the animals that would be coming out of these January placements align to some extent with the August live cattle contract, and that's already the one that was the beat down the most. We already, I think, to a certain extent, had this priced into the market, is the point. So there might be a bearish tone with those larger placements, but I think there's folks in the industry that may not be the ones surveyed on the pre-report that's quote unquote saw it coming, and that was built into the market a little bit. So it won't surprise me if there's a little bit of a bearish tone to the market, early this week from that, but not as much as we normally would expect when you have a quote unquote extra large placement number.
And if you look a little deeper into the numbers and the implications and take into account, for one thing, the dry weather conditions we've seen in the plains, the impact on such things as wheat pasture cattle movement, once again, that adds to the picture here.
No, it certainly does. And, break that apart, those weather-oriented pressures are worse south of I-70 than they are north of I-70. So we see that in terms of inventory numbers and placement numbers, break it down by state, and it's very consistent with the weather discussion you just said. Go further with this, I think it's important to keep context. Let's ignore month-to-month variability for a moment, and I know that's risky for an individual operation, but put our industry-wide hat on for a second. We haven't changed the calf crop size. We're just altering the timing of when these animals come in, and importantly, what weights they come in. So if the animals come in at a different weight because they didn't have as much time on wheat or grass or whatever the alternative production system was, if they're placed a little bit lighter, normally, all else equal, they come out a little lighter as well. So there's a little bit of a natural hedge, if you like, because of that on the total amount of beef that gets produced given in any 6 or 8 month window. So this is important to monitor, and yes, it's influencing the timing of when animals hit the yard, but on balance, it's not changing the aggregate beef supply story very much, and there may even be a little bit of a net hedge that pulls those pounds down because we're pushing them in a little sooner. That is probably important here in 2018 because folks like me that are running around the country this time of year see piles of grain everywhere, and there is a risk that dressed weights would go up more than we expect if grain is cheaper than quote-unquote anticipated, or even just local basis deals are such that given operations could put more weight on than we expect. So we probably need a little bit of this hedge to help us keep those slaughter weights steady, if not up too much, here in 2018.
Another USDA report came out last week, this on Thursday, the cold storage report, which lets us know more in detail about beef and other red meats in storage. What did those numbers have to say?
Yeah, so specific to beef first, it's consistent with the kind of optimistic demand point I made a moment ago. Beef is still moving. So beef storage, cold storage stocks are up 2% from the prior month, but importantly, they're down 7% from the prior year, yet net production is up. So that's confirmation again that we continue to move product, and that's very good. Maybe to throw a little bit of water on that for just a moment, frozen pork as well as chicken supplies are up notably compared to the prior year for the same month, 8% for pork and 13% actually for chicken. So that's worth monitoring. Is while I have noted in recent demand discussions that I think competing meats don't have as large of an impact as we once thought, it doesn't mean we can ignore them. So if there are growing pork and chicken supplies for whatever reason, that is worth monitoring for the beef industry.
All right. Well, as mentioned, you will be sharing your near and long-term outlook on the beef cattle market at the upcoming Cattlemen's Day here at K-State this Friday. What will be the general drift of your comments there, Glynn?
So I'm going to walk through, a quote-unquote typical outlook as I've done before, but I've been asked to have a elevated focus on trade this year. The Christmas present from 2017 in the form of higher cattle prices than we thought we would have, in no small part was because beef exports were very good in 2017 compared to what we thought. And while that, that's easy to absorb at face value, there's some depth to that story that I'm going to outline in our extended time that we have here in Manhattan on Friday. But I'm also going to share some information just to give some context about who we trade with, why I'm optimistic about trade, some concerns I have about trade, and more broadly, just try to educate on the importance of trade and how important it is to the bottom line. So I'm going to share statistics like, what does it mean per hundredweight of value to you as a producer if we increase trade and those kind of things that people can resonate with, but also just try to dispel some myths. Imports aren't necessarily bad, and this is why, that kind of stuff is what I'll be trying to walk through in our talk on Friday.
And to augment that, all the hullabaloo about trade deals, where we stand with NAFTA, obviously the exit from the TPP, all of that that considered, the ability to move product abroad has been impressive. And as long as that holds up, the outlook has to be encouraging.
Yeah, so on balance, we definitely have some headwinds on, let's call them the trade deal, political front, as you alluded to, yet we continue to have a positive story. That's a very good thing. We're in position, we have growing volumes, the U.S. dollars allowed that, and I do think there's demand for U.S. meat abroad that's, the pull factor and all that. But I will pause and say, not to take my full thunder away from next Friday, but just imagine how good it would be if we had fewer political hurdles and so forth. So I'm not going to wear my political hat too hard on Friday, but I will be trying to educate that a little bit.
Very good. Looking forward to maybe an even more positive commentary on the outlook for beef trade and other aspects of the market when Glynn presents his session at Cattlemen's Day coming up on Friday. Until then, Glynn, thanks for coming over today. Looking forward to hearing what you have to say at Cattlemen's Day.
Thanks for having me, Eric.
Livestock economist Glynn Tonsor, K-State Research and Extension, with this week's comments on the cattle market trends. After the break, we'll hear from another individual who'll be presenting information at Cattlemen's Day as well this Friday. After this, over the K-State Radio Network. For 25 years, K-State Research and Extension's Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services has been providing a no-cost, confidential place to call in and visit with an agricultural lawyer. Our experts are available to help you producers handle legal and financial issues. Explore your options and generate solutions. Call us at 800-321-3276 or visit us online. Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services. We're back now on this Agriculture Today, and we want to pass along to you on this segment more information that will be presented in full at the 2018 Cattlemen's Day here at K-State later this week, Friday, March the 2nd. And this particular breakout session, to be exact, will cover the steps to follow in adding value to cull cows by putting them on a feeding program, an idea that has merit, our guest tells us. He's Terry Hauser, Research and Extension Meats Specialist at Kansas State University. And Terry, you actually are conducting research in this area, right?
Yeah, that's right, Eric. We've done some preliminary research over the years on ways to add value to cull cows. Generally speaking, it's pretty common knowledge that a lot of cows, the majority of the cows are culled in the fall of the year after a breeding exam shows an open female. And so one of the ways simply that we can add value to these cows is by moving her marketing window from the fall to the spring. And one way we can do that and add additional value is to put that animal on feed.
Economically speaking, and we tend to overlook this, the marketing of cull cows is a fair percentage of the income that comes back to the cow-calf operation, right?
Yes, that's correct, Eric. I think the numbers that are thrown around in the industry are somewhere around 20% of the income from an average cow-calf operation or come from cull cows and bulls.
And the particular feeding program you're looking at here, what objectives are you trying to find out in your work?
Well, what we're doing for Cattlemen's Day is we've selected some second parity females that did not get bred back. And so they're younger animals. And we're looking at how we can improve their carcass weight or dressing percentage of those cows by putting them on a short-term feeding program.
And that's an important component here when you talk about the dressing percentage. It's not just about putting extra weight on the cull cow, right?
That's absolutely right. When we feed cows, it's kind of interesting. If we would just slaughter a cow that was out in the pasture, she would typically have a dressing percent somewhere around 50%, maybe a little higher, depending on how much fat that cow has. However, if we were able to put that cow on feed for a period of time, we will be able to increase her dressing percent substantially. So if you do a little quick math, if you had a 1,200-pound cow that dressed 50%, her carcass weight would be roughly 600 pounds. However, if we had a similar animal at the same weight, so say 1,200 pounds, and her dressing percent was 60%, you'd have a carcass that weighed 720 pounds. Now, typically we don't have cows that dress up to 60%, but that shows the example of the impact that dressing percent has on carcass yield of those animals.
When you put those cows on feed, in effect, the composition of the eventual carcass changes then, right?
Yes, very much so. A couple other things that happen when we put cows on feed, their lean color, it gets better or younger appearing, which can help with quality grading. They will tend to have larger ribeyes, so they're going to gain some muscle mass back. And they will have increases in external fat deposition, which will also impact or increase dressing percent.
Does the type of ration itself make a difference here? Is it the standard concentrate, or are you doing anything out of the ordinary here?
No, we're just the cows for Cattlemen's Day, or at least our experiment for Cattlemen's Day. They're on a finishing ration at this point. You know, we used a common step-up diet. I think they're on right now about 90% concentrate and 10% roughage from the last numbers that I saw. So, you know, we would probably get them as close to a feedlot diet as we could.
And the length of the feeding period, what?
It really depends. One of the things about feeding cull cows that a producer should be very aware of is that you really need to work with a processor if you're going to do this. We have some processors, that are within some close proximity. Gibbon Packing up in Gibbon, Nebraska is one of those, and then Elkhorn Valley Packing down in Wellington would be another. But you need to work with them because they may have some standards on how long those cattle need to be on feed for them to take them or give you any premiums or et cetera. We can see changes in gut fill and carcass weight in as little as 40 days on feed. To really get the biggest bang for your buck, you're probably looking at 60 to 90 days. And depending on the animal, if you have some really young cows, which is the case with our cows here at K-State that were on feed, those cows, you might even get them up to over 100 days on feed. So they almost resemble are pretty close to resembling just regular fat cattle.
Again, you're stressing that to get the maximum return out of these fed cows, one needs to process them directly and not take them to a sale barn. They'll lose the premium, basically, if they do so?
Well, basically, it's all about communication. And if the buyers have the knowledge that those cattle were on feed for a certain period of time, it's likely that they may, it's not, I can't say likely, but they may pay more for them. However, if there's no information that indicates that those cattle have been on feed, a buyer has no reason to give you any more money for those cattle than, say, someone else's that were not on a high concentrate diet. And the reason for that is when we put those cows on feed, a high concentrate ration, their fat actually changes from yellow to white. And so the term that's used in the industry is those are what we call white fat cows. They can be used for more uses, such as some branded beef programs that some of the packers like American Foods Group have that basically focus on those B and C maturity type cattle.
Right. And back to the age of the cull cows you're putting on feed, one needs to more or less lean toward the younger end of that spectrum as opposed to putting the gummers on feed, you say?
Yeah, that's probably pretty accurate, Eric. When we look at an average population of a beef cow herd, you're going to see that most of the animals that you have in that herd are going to be younger animals. So realistically, when we sell old cows, we don't actually sell that many old ones compared to the young ones that don't breed over their lifetime. Many of these animals, if you put them on feed, they would be eligible for A and B maturity, depending on what their age is, especially if, for instance, they are a first calf heifer who has a calf and doesn't breed back. Those animals are clearly younger than 42 months of age. And so those animals would still be eligible for A and B maturity, which translates into prime choice standard quality grades. So they have a larger inherent value than, say, an old gummer cow who's only eligible for like a breaker or a boner type of market. One of the things I think that we often have trouble doing is communicating what we have as far as ag producers. And I think one of the things that I would encourage folks to do is to make sure if you take cull cows to a sale barn, if you're going to market them that way, that you let that sale barn know the age of those animals and let them know that you may have some heiferettes in there or segregate them by ear tag, by year that they were born, or however you want to do that. Because generally speaking, or many times, buyers, if they know their heiferettes are young cows, they will pay more money for those animals.
So sort by age.
Yeah. But if they don't know that and you don't share that information with them, they can just give you the run-of-the-mill price.
So these are ideas on succeeding with a cull cow feeding program. You'll be sharing this information and putting on a bit of a demonstration at Cattlemen's Day, so you might tell us about that.
Yes, Eric, that's right. We will have a show and tell, so to speak, where we have basically selected animals from our cow-calf unit that were first parity, or actually second parity females that didn't breed back. So they're younger animals. They were selected out of that herd. And basically, we have some that we put on feed on a high concentrate ration at the beef research unit. Then we have some that were not on feed. So they're basically just, on a normal pasture kind of diet. Basically, we're going to harvest those animals in our meat laboratory, and we will have the resulting carcasses there for our folks there at Cattlemen's Day to look at and to see the differences that what a fed cow looks like compared to a non-fed cull cow.
And that will demonstrate what we're talking about in terms of the actual product return to feeding these cows out.
Yes, absolutely. So we actually did this, I believe it was in 2009, where we looked at fed versus non-fed cows as well. And so what we should be able to show you is a pretty accurate description of what changes in carcass weight and how much muscle these animals gain. And it's really amazing how fast they are able to put on lean muscle and then also fat, given that they've just been out hanging out in the pasture or out on corn stalks or whatever where they're at.
This will make for a terrific breakout session as part of Cattlemen's Day. Feeding Cull Cows for Profit is the title of that session, taking place in the afternoon. Terry will, of course, be hosting that. Terry, great work. And in parting here, you would encourage producers that are culling cows as a routine to maybe look at this angle of adding value to their operation.
Yes, I would. I think it has a lot of merit. We often concentrate on our calf crop is where we put all of our efforts, and I think there is some good money to be made on the other end in just getting more dollars back for those cull cows.
Looking forward to your presentation during Cattlemen's Day on this, and thank you for the preview.
Thank you, Eric.
He's a research and extension meats specialist at K-State, Terry Hauser, and again, he'll be sharing this information based on the trials here at the university on cull cow feeding at Cattlemen's Day here at Kansas State University. To remind once again, that is set for this Friday, March the 2nd at Weber Hall and Arena. If you haven't registered already or checked out the program, you can take care of both of those matters by going to ksubeef.org. ksubeef.org has full details on Cattlemen's Day 2018 here at K-State. You're tuned to Agriculture Today. Now, this break here on the K-State Radio Network.
Did you eat today? Thank a farmer. A way to get more involved in agriculture is through 4-H and FFA. Through 4-H and FFA, we have been given multiple opportunities to grow as leaders and learn more about agriculture.
You can learn skills related to jobs, public speaking skills, and you get the opportunity to travel around the country and meet new people.
If you want more information about getting more involved in 4-H and FFA, visit them on their websites at kansasffa.org and kansas4h.org.
This is Agriculture Today. I'm Jeff Wickman. This is the time of year when Kansas 4-H members have an opportunity to showcase their communication skills, often related to a current project at 4-H Days. Southeast Area 4-H specialist Beth Hinshaw says that developing communication skills at an early age pays great dividends later in life.
4-H Day is our annual opportunity in our counties and districts across Kansas to showcase the communication skills that young people are learning. So if you were to attend a 4-H Day, you might see young people doing project talks or demonstrations or illustrated talks, public speaking. Those all can be individual events or maybe team events. And then there's also an opportunity for skits, maybe a club chorus, readings, dances, and sometimes some musical numbers as well. So all kinds of different opportunities for young people to be getting up and communicating something to an audience.
These are things that they also learn as just part of their 4-H club activities.
Definitely. Public speaking and, being able to get up in front of people has really been a hallmark of 4-H for more than 100 years. And that's one of the things that when we talk to alumni, that they tell us that they remember that, because of their experience in 4-H, they've always felt more comfortable getting up in front of a group.
How did they learn to do this? Because as you mentioned, it's a difficult thing to do. So how do we work them through this process?
The great thing about 4-H is that it starts very young. Most of our young people who are involved in a community 4-H club, that's just one of the expectations, maybe kind of unwritten expectation that everybody will give some kind of a public presentation. Maybe when you're 7 years old, that's a little shaky, but, as you do it when you're 8 and when you're 9 and when you're 10, it just gets a little bit easier all the time. We also try to start young people on the level that makes sense. So most kids, they might start with, maybe even show and tell kind of activity at their 4-H club, and then maybe go into a project talk where they just are going to tell us about a project. And so that's just a very easy entry-level kind of presentation. And then, as they gain skills, they may move on to a demonstration where they're actually going to show people how to do something, all the way up to our older kids often doing public speaking where they're trying to persuade or inform people.
As part of the 4-H days, then, you mentioned that there's a variety of ways that they can put these skills to practice. Is this something that they come up with on their own, or are they given a topic?
There are a couple of counties and districts that have an impromptu opportunity where young people come in, they're given a topic, they're given time, and they put something together. But the majority of the presentations that happen at 4-H Day, those are planned ahead of time. And a lot of times what our young people are doing is they're doing it on the project that they're enrolled in. And part of the great thing about that is we already know they're interested, let's say, in the rocketry project. So it makes perfect sense for them to do a presentation and teach other people about what they know about the rocketry project. And that gives them an opportunity to even maybe learn some new information about the project because they're putting this presentation together.
So they're learning how to do this really from the opening statement to the closing statement.
Yes, they are. And being able to put together your thoughts and organize them in a logical manner, even that is a life skill in itself. And how to find information or research on the topic. And then, how to express your ideas clearly and convincingly. And obviously with demonstrations and project talks, they also have an opportunity to learn more about how to prepare an appropriate visual that's really going to support the presentation.
So this gets into multimedia then?
Yes, it does. And at a number of our 4-H days, and even at the state fair where we have demonstration as well, we even see some actual computers used with slides and the whole bit. So, they're going all the way from that very, very entry-level project talk all the way up to doing something that even looks a lot more professional, like, what kids are doing in high school or college or, what people are even doing in the workplace.
Is this something then that they are judged on, or do they receive some sort of feedback?
Yes, each one of them will get feedback on their presentation. Most of our ribbons are on that Danish system of the purple being a presentation with no flaws, a blue, a couple of flaws that could be improved, a red ribbon would be the next ribbon, and that means that they've met the criteria, but there are some real opportunities for improvement. And then a white ribbon would mean there's a lot of improvement that needs to be made. So everybody will come away with a ribbon and typically an opportunity to even talk to the judge about their presentation and then some kind of a written scorecard as well.
And this is important feedback because it does help them get better and more comfortable with doing this.
Definitely. In 4-H, we talk about the experiential learning model. And that's where we do something, and then we reflect on it, and then we apply that new knowledge to when we do it again. So that's why this judging process at 4-H Day or, at the county fair or any other place that, we're doing these presentations, that's why it's so important, is because we have this expert in presentations who is listening to us and then helping us go back through what it was we presented and giving us some tips and helping us think about how we can do it better and improve for the next time. So there's that experiential learning model, that now we've learned something new that we're going to apply for the next time we do something.
And as you mentioned, this is a life skill that really everyone should develop.
Definitely. People say, they'd rather do anything in the world than talk in public. But you have opportunities throughout your life where it's important for you to be able to speak in public and tell people what your opinion is. And so we just think it's really important that we're teaching this skill at such a young age and that they're getting such great practice.
If somebody wants to learn more about the communication aspects of 4-H, how can they do that?
We have a whole great series of worksheets and fact sheets on the different kinds of presentations, how you'd put a demonstration together, how you'd put a project talk or a public speech together. And those you can find on the Kansas 4-H website, kansas4h.org. And if you look over on the right under What's Hot, there's a link to communication information.
That's Southeast Area 4-H Specialist Beth Hinshaw. Again, for more information, go to kansas4h.org or contact your county or district extension office. For Eric Atkinson, I'm Jeff Wickman. This is Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network.